Once there was a gentleman who married for his second wife the proudest and most haughty woman that was ever seen. She had, by a former husband, 2 daughters of her own, who were indeed exactly like her in all things. He had likewise, by another wife, a young daughter, but of unparalleled goodness and sweetness of temper, which she took from her mother, who was the best creature in the world. Welcome to Each Retelling, the podcast where we explore all the ways old tales are made new. I'm your host, Jasmine Garcia, and joining me once again are...
Sam Marchioni, you could not fit any of my feet into a glass slipper.
And Shamila Karanakaran, your girl with all the Cinderella lists.
We are going to be doing something a little different today, because we're not really going to be talking about just one story, but on the other hand, we kind of are, because we are going to be discussing international versions of Cinderella, because there are so many, you guys.
So many. It is a universally accepted fact that everybody loves a story about karma and upward mobility.
And about underdogs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. Like, we talked about this in the server. Brian was asking, what is it about this story that it seems to be one in every culture? And I basically just said, people love to see underdogs get their day. That's basically it. Obviously, if we were to delve into all of the international versions of the Cinderella story, we would be here all day. And we have things to do. So we did narrow it down to 4. The Egyptian Cinderella, or also known as Rhodopis. The Algonquin Cinderella, also known as the Rough-Faced Girl. Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters. And the Persian Cinderella, which actually came from the 1001 Arabian Nights book, which I just found out, so that's kind of neat.
Shout out to Scheherazade.
Yep,
Scheherazade is the original girl boss writer.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And she definitely needs more attention in the zeitgeist. She's just too cool.
Just imagining that 1001 Nights movie would have an ungodly runtime. Unfortunately, I do also know of struck miniseries that I can't talk about that involve brownface.
Of course.
We do have a Canadian cartoon up here, but it's a very kiddified version.
Yeah.
Woo! Go Canada.
I was saying that at some point I would absolutely love to see, like, a full series where, like, each episode is one of the nights. Like, obviously there's the kiddified version, but, like, it would be nice to see one that's a little more faithful. I think you could do something with that. Just like this epic, sweeping fantasy series. But anyway, moving on from that.
Different upward mobility story.
Yes. Obviously, to talk about our connections to Cinderella in full would involve struck work, which sucks.
But shout out to the stage version of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, because we can technically talk about that, so I'll take this moment to say, fuck Laura Osnes, you are not a Cinderella anymore.
No!
We only recognize Carly Rae Jepsen and Keke Palmer.
Fuck yes.
Keke Palmer, oh my god.
Oh, she was so gorgeous in that. But But yeah, like, it's almost redundant to ask what are all of our connections to Cinderella, because I feel like it is one of the most ubiquitous fairy tales out there. It is one of the most retold fairy tales out there. If you pull up the Wikipedia page of different versions of Cinderella, which I have done at one point, because at one point this was going to be a more randomized sort of thing. Can you imagine if I had done that?
Oh god, we would have been here forever.
So I'm
It's
glad.
our version of 1001 Nights.
Spin a wheel, pick a Cinderella.
Pretty much. There's just so many. And, you
Also,
know,
he made it before the strike, so shout out to Henry's massive modern Cinderella magnum opus.
Yes, that was amazing. Let's delve further into it. Obviously, other than the mouse and elephant in the room, what are all of our connections to Cinderella?
When I was growing up, my mom worked for this company that, among other things, they would every year have a book fair. And so when I went to the book fair, I think that might have been where I first came across the Egyptian Cinderella. But I also remember I had a picture book that was a Vietnamese Cinderella where there was a black ox that took the place of the fairy godmother. I cannot find that book anymore because I am no longer a child, but that was cool. And, you know, in 6th grade, I did Into the Woods, which has a great Cinderella story, even though the school version version is dumb because it cuts it down to just act 1, and I'm like, yeah, but you're missing all the best Sondheim that way.
You're missing the creamy nougat of the story.
Into the Woods is god tier.
It is, although honestly not nearly as bad as what Callie's school had done to Into the Woods.
Uh-oh.
I'm sure if they're on the Into the Woods episode, they'll mention it, but to sum it up, Callie didn't even know it was a musical until they met me, because...
What?
How?
Their drama director hated musicals.
So don't do Into the Woods!
That's what I said!
All these fairy tales are public domain! You can just take the story, write your own goddamn script!
I agree! But no, all they did was Into the Woods to blah, 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 blah. They just chanted it! I was furious!
Stephen Joshua Sondheim is rolling in his grave. This happened before he died, and he is rolling in his grave.
Because we just had to bring it out into the world again. Yes, sorry, Stephen Sondheim's ghost. We love and miss you. But yeah, Into the Woods, obviously. Ella Enchanted, obviously.
Excellent.
But, like I said, yeah, Cinderella is just kind of this ubiquitous story. In fact, I do distinctly remember, now that I'm thinking about it, there was this coloring book version that, back when my little brother was very little and very cute, we definitely read and colored that in together.
So, I am the rare unicorn who did not grow up with Disney, because we had a very tiny TV, no VCR, and no access to any sort of, video store. So, I was the weird kid that, lived in a library in elementary school. So, I would read different versions of Cinderella. I grew up with Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters. Art was just gorgeous, and we also had an audiobook version where they would play for us.
Yep, I did find that on Cloud Library. There is an audiobook version of Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters.
I mean, that's cool, but also, I don't understand audiobooks for picture books, because half the enjoyment of picture books comes from the absolutely gorgeous art. And I did have at least 3 of these. I definitely had Egyptian Algonquin and Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters.
Yeah.
When I was a kid. I don't remember Persian Cinderella, but I remember being in love with the art.
Point of picture books.
It is. And we did make a note because I was talking about how all of the connective tissue between all of these Cinderella stories, and I made a joke about how clearly one of them is gorgeous art.
There should be more picture books for adults, and I don't mean comic books.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
Destigmatize the picture book.
Absolutely. Beautiful art should belong to everybody.
Illuminated illustrations. Just classic.
I realized today would be a perfect time to kind of bring up the Arne Thompson-Uther Index. Sam and I, we talked about this before. Shami, I imagine you've heard of this.
I've heard of it directly, but I don't know all the details, so you're gonna have to break it out to me.
That is more than fine. It is essentially TV tropes before TV tropes, but specifically for fairy tales and folklore.
Oh, okay.
And
every kind of fairy tale has, a number code.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that the Cinderella one is 510A, basically. And
wait, I've heard of this, but I've heard about it, but it was under a different name for me.
I mean, there are multiple ways of categorizing fairy tales, of course, but this, at least from my understanding, because as you may have guessed, I spent a lot of time in my youth researching fairy tales.
Yes.
It's almost like that's how this all happened. So I did come across it quite a bit in my studies. And I was also telling Sam, it's kind of funny, though, because it's pretty Eurocentric, and it still very much is. But as soon as I got to the Cinderella category, I started seeing a lot more non-European countries, so I was like, oh, okay, then. And the funny...
Like we said, everybody loves a good upward mobility.
It is definitely, the biggest category I could find on here. There are so many. And again, it doesn't even cover all of them because none of the picture books that we're going to be talking about are here anyway. So we're going to start off with the Egyptian Cinderella.
I remember being obsessed enough with this that when I was 7, I think, my mom took me on a trip to England, and at the British Museum, like the dumb little white girl I was, I bought a little cloth doll of an Egyptian woman, and I named her after the bitchy head servant. I named her Keepa.
Oh, that's adorable. But okay, so this was what unleashed your Egyptian phase, basically?
Yeah.
This probably started it off. Behind
millennial-
every queer person, there is an Egypt phase and a Greek mythology phase.
Yeah,
I was
especially
both.
millennials.
And Rick Riordan taps into both of them.
Correct. And someday.
Yeah.
But okay, back to Rhodopis. Let's kind of just try to sum this up. So, Sam, you were the one who this was a huge thing for your childhood. I think it's only right that you could talk about it.
So, if you look at the back of the version that I grew up with by Shirley Climo, it has a little bit on the back explaining that this is at least partially based on fact. There was a pharaoh who married a Greek woman named Rhodopis, and she was a slave who was taken from Greece. According to the back of the book, she was also, like, friends with Aesop of Aesop's Fables.
Really?
Why?
Who told her the stories. But anyway, this is a young Greek girl who was captured by pirates and then sold to an Egyptian owner. And the way the story tells it is she gets constantly harassed by the Egyptian-born servant girls who are technically higher status than her and make her do all the work, classic Cinderella stuff. And Rhodopis, being a Cinderella, is friends to all of the wild creatures, and she dances with them. And her master sees her dancing with them and is like, I'm gonna give her something nice. Here's some rose red gilt slippers for you to wear. Then there's a big festival happening where everybody's going to see the pharaoh Amasis, and the servant girls are going, but Rhodopis isn't going because she has chores to do. And while she's doing her chores, one of her animal friends, a hippo, splashes mud on her shoes, and then a falcon just swoops in, takes the shoe, flies all the way to the city of Memphis, and drops it straight into Pharaoh Amasis's lap. And he's like, you know what? This shoe is a sign from the gods. I have to marry its owner. Let's go.
Talk about hijinks.
See, in Australia, they just call that swooping season, mate. You gotta be careful. You gotta mind the magpies. But anyway, the servant girls arrive and the palace is completely empty because we're going on shoe hunt, whatever, BCE.
You know what? People give the Prince from Cinderella crap for just going off of the shoot. At least he met the girl first.
Seriously. So anyway,
whole other level.
Anyway, finally, Amasis meets Rhodopis, and she's like, yeah, I have the other shoe, ta-da. And he's like, awesome, I'm gonna marry you and make you my queen. And the servant girls are like, no, you can't, she's not even Egyptian. And Amasis is like, shut up, her eyes are as green as the Nile, her hair is bright as the sun, and her skin's pink like the lotus. She is Egypt incarnate. I'm like, as a child, this was white girl validation at its finest. As a 20-something, I'm like,
Yeah. I think it does need to be acknowledged that there's something a little yikes about the undertones there. I don't even know if it was like colorism is also a tale as old as time, unfortunately.
Yeah,
unfortunately. But anyway, yeah, she marries the pharaoh. They live happily ever after. The end.
I mean, we made a lot of jokes here today, but the artwork is gorgeous. One of the downsides that this is a podcast is we really cannot make it too clear how gorgeous this art is.
But the good news is it's available on the Internet Archive, so you can just look it up and see it for yourself.
Yeah. We managed to find every single story that we are going to be talking about on the Internet Archive. Thank you, Internet Archive.
Please protect it. Donate to it. Like, fuck the studios and companies trying to say, you're infringing on our copyright. No, bro, it's a library. It's an online library.
It's
chill.
Public domain.
I mean, these aren't necessarily public domain. They're based off of public domain stories, but I imagine the books themselves are not technically.
But don't infringe on
right.
the author's rights.
Because let's be real, they ain't paying the authors.
No, obviously not.
An author's Cinderella story where it's just getting a proper deal for your book.
Hell yes.
Yes.
I like this.
Zero Deja has a whole TikTok about this. I remember.
Oh,
Yep.
ooh.
Yeah.
You'll have to link me.
Yeah, I'm linking.
We stand them.
Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. Okay, we got it out.
No, we haven't. We're gonna come back to it again. But yeah, being a blonde, blue, green-eyed girl myself back then, I was like, oh yay, it me. I'm a pretty Egyptian queen. And yes, then Egyptology phase unlocked, and unfortunately, it was all downhill from there. Like I said, had the doll, named her Kipa, which I don't know what that says to me, except maybe that was an indication of my future destiny to crush upon villains. Decent villains, mind you. Don't take your garbage villains near me. No, that's a fascist. Get them away.
Yeah.
We all know who I'm talking about.
Yes, we do.
Unfortunately.
But yeah, this was, at least as a historical record, because obviously these things are complicated, this was the first Cinderella story to be written, basically.
To be recorded, because oral tradition, very tricky in itself.
Exact. Many indigenous people basically did solely oral tradition pre-colonization, so it can be hard to kind of gauge which came first.
And I think it's also worth noting, as we're transitioning into the rough-faced girl, I live on the unceded ancestral lands of the Massachusetts, the Pawtucket, and the Namkeg, all of whom are part of the Algonquin religious and language families, even though the version of the rough-faced girl I read is said to have taken place on the shores of Lake Ontario, which is very far from where I am, but, there are variations within these cultures because it's a very large swath of land.
Yep, I was going to say, because I grew up on Long Island, we definitely talked a lot about the Algonquin and Iroquois because...
It was part of our history lessons in social studies.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We had a whole unit about the Native American tribes that lived there. Oh, we didn't go into very much detail, of course, but we did indeed talk about them, and I do believe Rough-Faced Girl was part of that, as well as just, at least in my school, there was always a unit where we would just talk about different versions of fairy tales, which definitely helped unlock my obsession. And we definitely went over the Egyptian Cinderella, Rough-Faced Girl, Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters, and I'm pretty sure we did Persian Cinderella at one point, but I can't be sure. Like I said, this is almost like a back-to-school thing we're doing just in time.
Just before we started recording, we had this whole hullabaloo because the version I read was very different from the version that Jazz and Sam read.
Yep, we found out there is multiple versions of just this version of Cinderella, which I love.
This version did not come from Lake Ontario. This came from Nova Scotia. And we knew it under the Algonquin Cinderella, or, well, if you have a textbook on hand of Fairy Tale of Folklore, it was also known as the Indian Cinderella, which anachronistic and very racist. Let's be honest.
They can reclaim that word. We can't reclaim that word.
Exactly.
Nope.
So, to break down this fairy tale for you, there is this great warrior called Strongwind. He lives with his sister in the tent on the Atlantic Ocean. He's able to make himself invisible. His sister can see him, but no one else could. And then one day he says that he's going to marry the first woman who sees him when he comes home at the end of the day. So many women will come to the tent to watch him, and then his sister, acting as a gatekeeper for him, would see him coming, and then she would ask, "Do you see him?" And every girl would lie and say, "Oh yes, I see him." And then the sister would ask, "When's he coming inside with?" And then the girls would make up something like with a rope or with a wooden pole. And she would always know that they were lying. And because he's the hero of this whole thing, Strongwind is not going to marry anyone who is lying. And then we cut to a chief living in a village. His wife has died, but he has 3 daughters. One is much younger than the other 2. She's kind and gentle and beautiful, but her sisters are jealous and they treat her awfully. And this is potentially scarring for who knows about residential schools and relationships with hair. They cut off her hair and they make her wear rags, and then they also burn her face with coals from the fire to make her look ugly. On top of that, they lie to their father and say that their youngest sister had done all of these to herself.
Which, the original Cinderella story, the whole reason she's called Cinderella is because she's sits by the fire and her face gets smudged. This is a much harsher version of that when you think about it.
Yeah.
And it does not reflect well on the father.
No.
Exactly.
But, do any of these Cinderella's fathers really come off that great?
It varies from version to version, because a lot of the times the father is dead, but...
A lot of the times he's just there, but neglectful.
Yeah, even in Into the Woods, the stage version specifically, we see he's basically an alcoholic, and he does not pay a bit of attention because he's probably grieving his wife.
The closer to the family, the closer to the wine.
Well, at least that's some sort of explanation.
Yeah, but still, it definitely still screws things up for Cinderella.
Yeah. So, the 2 older sisters also try to go to see Strongwind, and of course, they go through the whole song and dance thing where the sister asks, "Do you see him? And what is he wearing? And what is he pulling?" And, of course, Strongwind's sister is not having any of them. She says, "You have not seen him." One day, then the youngest daughter would try to go see Strongwind, and of course, the sisters and the villagers all laugh at her, pointing and laughing, and it's just like this whole spectacle of her patching up her rags and trying to tidy herself up as best she can, even though her face is covered in burns, and it's just a little bit, it's heart-wrenching when you read about this. And then she comes to Strongwind's tent, and probably the first act of kindness she's had in a long time, that the sister greets her and treats her kindly and welcomes her into the tent. And then, when she's finally asked, "Do you see him?" she does something different. "No, I don't see him." And the sister is completely surprised because she's actually telling the truth. And then she asks, "Now do you see him?" And then the girl says, "Yes, I do see him. He's magnificent. What is this bow made of?" "The rainbow." "And then what is the bowstring made of?" Now, the version I have says that it's the Milky Way. But I think other versions I've seen says it's just stars. But I find the Milky Way a bit more...
I will say in the version that Sam and I were both more familiar with, the rainbow and the Milky Way are both aspects of it, but she never says that she doesn't see him. She basically, as she's walking, meet with them,
she sees him in nature.
Yeah, she sees signs of him everywhere, which that is very romantic when you think about it.
Yeah. And then Strongwind's sister knew that the girl was telling the truth. And I keep referring to her as a girl because she is never actually named in any of these versions, or technically, there is one version where they do have, like, they give her a name in the Algonquin language, but it's literally the rough-faced girl.
Which, this is actually pretty common in folklore. It's about a 50-50 shot if you have a name.
And if you have a name, it's probably just describing something about you. Snow White, you're pasty as hell. Cinderella, you sit by the ashes. Belle, you're pretty.
Yeah, basically the only one I can think of that's not is like Rumpelstiltskin, and that ends up being his downfall anyway.
I mean, if you go back to, in European folklore at least, because I don't know a lot about the traditions with naming outside of that, but never give your name to the Fae!
That is true.
They will use it against you. There are power over names.
Never enter your real name on a U-quiz. You have no idea who's on the other end of it.
Or at least not your full name. Come on.
Fairy tale, I think.
There we go, modern fairy tale.
Right, on the other end, using a U-quiz in order to get real names.
That'd be hilarious. I absolutely love that.
But anyways,
yes.
The sister then takes the girl to a sacred spring, and then the burns go away, or she's dressed in fine clothes, and Strongwind comes in and takes her in as his wife. Now, this is also the end of this is also very subjective because there's different versions, because in some versions this is where it ends, but there's also an addition where the two girls, the oldest sister, were very angry, but Strongwind, knowing of what they had done to his wife, he turns them into aspen trees, and then ever since that day, the leaves of the aspen trees tremble with fear whenever the wind comes near, because he knows he will never...
I mean, I do love when there's karmic punishment for the evil sisters in a Cinderella retelling. Because, like, I know we didn't talk about it, but if you go to, like, the parole of Cinderella, where she just marries her stepsisters off to lords of the court, like, yeah, I forgive you for all the years of psychological abuse. Have husbands. Like, on the one hand, I get that demonstrates your Cinderella is a good person, but come on, let's have some birds pecking out eyes.
And actually, I did forget to mention, there is a very, very good YA story called Stepsister.
Our version, I don't think, had that, which is disappointing, because in the version that we read, the rough-faced girl and her sisters, they were not the daughters of a chief. They were the daughters of a poor man.
Yep,
so it's like a big thing that father gives the older sisters super pretty dresses, and then there's nothing left for the rough-faced girl.
But she takes it with grace.
She takes it with grace. She takes her dad's old moccasins and a bunch of broken shells and birch bark and makes regalia for herself, and that's another reason everybody's laughing at her. And in that version, I feel a little more generous towards the father, because if he's a poor man, he's probably having to work to supply for his daughters.
If he's a chieftain, then that's a lot more responsibility on his head.
So there are different explanations for each. It just, I don't know, it feels like someone as prominent as a chieftain, it would reflect poorly on him, so I guess that's why the sisters play the, oh, she wants to do it card. Look, these sisters, man, they deserve to be trees.
Yeah, pretty much.
I wonder if there's magic on them to make sure that nobody can ever chop them down so that they have to eternally suffer.
There should be.
Oh. Ooh. Ooh, that's
chilling.
A little bit. Yikes. There's a story prompt, listeners. Particularly any of our listeners who happen to be native.
I like this story a lot as a Cinderella story because a lot of the times we talk about Cinderella as like a story about innate goodness getting rewarded, but it often feels informed rather than demonstrated. And the version we read, especially where she's walking through nature and it's showing her connection to him.
If she's able to see him when no one else can, that is a gorgeous, gorgeous metaphor for what makes a good relationship, I feel like. Because I feel like that's really what those of us who are inclined to want romantic love do want.
And I like how that this is a Cinderella story where there's the key virtue is honesty. Like, so much Cinderella from the perspective of the suitor, it's a mystery.
That's true.
We have our MacGuffin, let's go hunt down the perfect lady who I don't really know that well. But in this story, she's coming to him, and the reason that he's so appealing to her is that there are no lies between them.
That's actually a really good point. I never would have made that connection. That's gorgeous, actually.
It's a beautiful story. I really like it.
Yeah,
I'd love to see Kelly Lynn D'Angelo work on like a stage version of this.
Ooh. Like, yeah, I feel like all of these versions definitely deserve a little more exposure in general.
There was one point continued with me, but this could be just because coming from me as a disabled person,
You're not a fan of her getting healed up at the end?
Not completely. Like, I do get that that her being disfigured was not a choice. But I feel like they could have asked her what they wanted her to do with her face. Because obviously with the hair is traumatic in a culturally specific way. But with her face, like, they could have asked her what she wanted to do. Like, I feel like they could have turned her face into, like, this beautiful pattern of vitiligo.
That would have been interesting.
Instead of, like, the complete erasure. But again, this is going to be her choice, but it does feel in a way to be in a form of disability erasure, even though it probably isn't.
I see what you mean, though.
No,
like,
you're absolutely right. Facial differences, they are a form of disability, and I've grappled with it myself, and I'm working to be better about it. Like, that is a good point to make.
I think this is something that just kind of is coming up a lot more in terms of not even just this story, but especially like any Beauty and the Beast story. Like, people who are making like Greta Garbo is just like, why does he have to change at the end, though?
Yeah, although that one gets weird because often the Beast is portrayed as an animal, so it's like, okay, is this a disability thing, or are we getting into furry territory?
That's a fine line.
And then you get into the question of, like, dehumanizing disabled people.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a complicated issue, for sure. But with any story where it ends with somebody being transformed back into normal, quote-unquote normal.
I feel like with the rough-faced girl, there's a happy medium. She can be healed to the point where it doesn't hurt her anymore, but she could have some sort of facial difference. Like, the vitiligo maybe around certain parts of her face. That could form, because especially since Strongman is said to have his bone is drawn with the Milky Way, it could be like a beautiful reference to that.
Oh god, yeah, like constellations on I'm obsessed with like the idea of constellation markings on people.
Yes.
And we'll get back to that when we get to the Persian Cinderella.
Yes. Yes, that is true. That is very relevant. Let's move on to Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters. This one was also very much part of that curriculum.
Just off the cover, I do take objection to them calling this an African tale when they're very specific on the inside. They say specifically that the illustrations, at least, are based on Zimbabwe and the names of the characters are in the Shona language. Like, this was an opportunity to get specific and not conglomerate everything in that entire continent into Africa.
Not a country.
Yeah, please, for the love of God, can we stop doing that?
That being said, the artwork is goddamn beautiful.
It really is. We really cannot state enough how gorgeous the illustrations are in these stories.
It's like a certain dreamy quality to it. It's so soft.
These are definitely watercolors, and they look freaking phenomenal.
They really do. And along with being in the Cinderella tradition, this is also kind of in the tradition, because there's a lot of stories where there's basically one kind-hearted sibling and one selfish sibling, and they both go on a journey trying to get the same thing, and the selfish one ends up not succeeding because they're selfish, and the selfless one ends up succeeding because they're kind, basically. So it's kind of combining two very common folktale traditions, I find.
Yeah.
So with Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters, basically, both of the sisters are considered considered to be equal in beauty. They're both beloved by their town and their father. But one of them knows that her sister is more well-liked because she's nicer, basically. What a concept.
And yet her response is not, maybe I should be nicer too. It's like, no, everybody's wrong and being nice sucks.
And when I'm queen, because she's very entitled to the idea that she's going to be queen one day and her sister's going to be her servant. And what I love is that the sister just feels sorry for her, that is how she thinks. It's just, and like, yeah, it must be exhausting.
Yeah, like
thinking that way.
Yeah.
Props to Nyasha. Their names are Manyara and Nyasha.
Yes.
And Nyasha just like, yep, okay.
She's just
Okay.
very chill, going to her garden with the plants and bonding with
She's
the little
living that
snake.
good cottagecore life.
Yes.
That Zimbabwean cottagecore life. I love that for her. Yeah, and like there is something kind of beautiful about the fact that it's just like, I just feel sorry for you, sis. Because, yeah, like as much as people try to make it out that it's easier to be selfish, it's also very isolating and lonely.
Yeah.
Puts you at competition with everybody. I definitely don't know anybody like that at all.
The
Yes.
story really kicks off when Nyasha finds a little snake in her garden. And props to her for being like, oh, hi, little Nyoka. You can be my friend now.
Aw,
True
adorable.
princess qualities. Me, with my herpetological phobias, I would be like, nope, slowly walking away.
Oh yeah, as a little kid, I think this part scared me because I used to be deathly afraid of snakes.
Boy.
I was a complete snake girl as a kid. No.
But anyway, getting back to it, shout out to her. She's kind to the snakes. She's like, you know what? And you'll help keep all the flowers safe because, pest control.
It's worth noting, because we've been talking about the negligent fathers, but in this case, Manyara is very careful not to let her father see her abusing her sister, and Nyasha does not want to make her father feel bad, so
Yeah, it's like...
get this family a little therapy, please.
Yeah, and like any clever bully, I'm sure she also plays it off like she's so sweet, and if she was ever to receive any pushback on that, she's like, do you see how mean she's being to me?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
and
even
I'm
like
pretty
the
sure
very
that-
next thing that happens in the story is the announcement that the king wants a wife and the most worthy and beautiful daughters in the land are invited, and Manyara is immediately like, oh, daddy, we both love you so much. I know it would kill Nyasha, so she shouldn't have to go to the city and meet the king at all. Just send me. And
He's just like,
he
no.
buys it to an extent, like, oh, yes, my daughter loves me, but both of my girls are so wonderful, so you both, no, we're all going.
You both deserve your chance.
Shout out to
Which-
Mufaro, easily one of the best Cinderella fathers here.
He is a good dad.
He is a very good dad.
This is the part where we get to the morality journey. So the elements are a little boy who asks for food because he's hungry, and in the illustrations he has like little elf ears that you have to wonder how Manyara didn't clock.
That something
She's
magical
a
was
little
going on.
self-absorbed, so it makes sense if
Yeah.
she
True.
doesn't notice.
And after that comes an old woman who gives her advice, and then there is a grove of laughing trees and a man with his head tucked under his arm. And so Manyara's response to these trials is to tell the boy, go away, I'm going to be your queen, I don't have any food for you. She completely disrespects the old woman and calls her ugly.
Which, yeah, that never causes any problems.
Absolutely
in
not.
folktales.
She then gets to the grove of laughing trees and laughs back at them, even though she was told not to. And she disrespects the man with his head under his arm.
Had one job.
And
One
also,
job.
I'm wondering why she didn't freak out with the man with the head under his arm. But it's like, did you really not notice anything amiss there?
I mean, like you said, she's
maybe
very
he was just
self-absorbed.
like doing like some stretches or something. The illustration doesn't 100% make it clear to me like how the head is tucked under the arm.
But yeah, nope, she's just being rude to everybody because she thinks she's going to be queen and that therefore she has the right to do that. Which of itself is also a problem, of course.
Yes.
Yeah,
This
and
shit
so
is why we got rid of the monarchy.
and so because Manyara snuck off in the middle of the night, everybody wakes up the next morning like, where's Manyara? And they're like, she must have gone on ahead. So then they do the same path, and Nyasha gives the boy a yam from her lunch. She's very nice to the old lady and thanks her, gives her a pouch of sunflower seeds. She doesn't laugh at the trees. They get to the city, and Manyara runs out of the palace like, there's a monster in the castle, don't send Nyasha in. So we'll give Manyara 1 point. She's like, don't send my sister into the monster to get eaten. So Nyasha's still like, things have been weird. I wonder if things are even weirder. And so she's like, Dad, please take care of Manyara. And she goes into the king's throne room. And there's her little snake friend. And the snake friend is actually the king.
And he was everybody.
He was the little elf boy who wanted the food, and he was the old lady. He doesn't say he was the trees or the man with his head under his arm, but if he was, that would make sense why he wasn't there when Nyasha got to that point.
Yeah.
Because he was busy scaring the shit out of Manyara.
Yep, it's just like, you rude bitch.
He's like, yeah, you were nice to me even when I was a snake, and the way that the story tells it, he says, it would make me very happy if you would be my wife.
Aww,
so
adorable.
She says, yes, she gets married, and Mufaro is very, very happy because he has two beautiful daughters, his daughter Nyasha the queen, and Manyara, who is a servant in the queen's household, and that is what we call karma!
Yes!
I'm sure that Manyara is probably in charge of the wardrobe or something. She's not, like, suffering terribly as a servant.
Yeah, Nyasha wouldn't do that. Like, there are definitely Cinderellas that are totally cool with her stepsisters being tormented, but nah. Nyasha's not that kind of girl.
Nyasha's chill.
Yeah. Nyasha's very that chill cottagecore girl who goes on to become queen. And I'm pretty sure she's like promoting agricultural projects as queen.
I like to think so.
I'd be down with that.
Wildlife preservation.
If you look at the Wikipedia section for the Shona people, they have like a little section dedicated to agriculture. And I mean, it talks mostly about subsistence agriculture, but it's cool.
So?
They also could go into like the different name meanings for all the characters. So Mufaro means happy man in Shona, which goes into his like happy good-naturedness, who loves his daughters, and then Nyasha means mercy.
Aww.
And Manyara means ashamed.
Oh my god. This sounds like a white people reverse engineering some shit.
Yeah,
No,
that's very possible.
Because
Because
all in the Shona language, so these are actual names.
I don't know. It feels to me like a white people thing to when you're adapting a fairy tale from another language. Like, how can I demonstrate that this is the bad sister? I give her a name like Ashamed.
Yeah.
I might be wrong. And
you know, translations aren't objective necessarily.
Oh, absolutely not. When a woman started translating the Iliad and the Odyssey, completely different
but John Steptoe was
stories.
actually black.
Oh, but was GM Thiel? Well, look at the opening. It says, Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters was inspired by a folktale collected by GM Thiel and published in 1895 in his book Kaffir Folktales. So I don't want to step on John Steptoe.
I don't
Oh,
think
yep,
it's the
that
author.
is a white man. That is a white man.
What a surprise.
He even has the stupid mustache that makes you know he's a white man.
Oh, God.
Maconial
Hang on.
is strong with this one.
I'm not throwing shade on John Steptoe at all.
We're throwing a little shade on McTheil, though.
Completely.
Yep. It's still a fucking amazing book. This is absolutely a story I would love to read to children were I in the mind to procreate.
Absolutely.
I actually did reread this too. Like during when she was college, there was a unit that I had to teach for English Lit, and this was actually the story I read when I was doing comparison with Cinderella.
Good choice. I unfortunately never got to do my own Cinderella unit here, but it is what it is. But yeah, if I ever become a mother, I would love to at some point, but it's looking less and less likely. Tear. But no, this would definitely be part of the
You could still invoke it as an auntie.
Yes.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But yeah, it's just a very lovely story, a very good morality tale.
I kind of want to see a version of this where Danae Benton plays Nyasha.
Yes. Absolutely.
Oh, that'd be perfect. She'd be so good. I mean, she basically is a princess.
Freaking beautiful voice. I love Danae Benton.
Me too. That would be so good. Or Joy Woods. Joy Woods could probably do it too.
Oh, yeah, totally. I think Cynthia Erivo might have aged out of it.
Alas.
Lupita Nyong'o. I know she did Broadway.
She has.
I don't know if she's sung. I know that she's done like stage plays and stuff.
Yes.
She can
But
sing.
no, I would love
I've heard her.
Oh, cool. The moral of the story is put more black women in musicals.
Put more
Yes,
dark-skinned
please.
black women in musical because we are not about colorism.
Hell, I mean, speaking of former Cinderellas, Kiki Palmer could probably pull it off too.
Yes.
more black women in musicals and more not just the standard Cinderella in musicals. Like, I would absolutely love to see every single one of these being made into a musical. But that's just because I'm me and I want everything to be a musical.
Indeed.
But moving along then to the Persian Cinderella. This one was interesting.
This went on such a wild turn at the end.
Which, when I read in the author's notes from the 1001 Nights, I was like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so what probably happened was the sun came up about halfway through the story and Scheherazade was like, shit.
Gotta come up with more. But let's get into it. So, the Cinderella's name is Satara.
And it means star because she has a star-shaped birthmark on her left cheek.
Yes, which is adorable.
It's adorable, and it's also the most 13-year-old girl special protagonist thing in the world, which makes me love it even more.
I'm honestly shocked you didn't see more OCs in fan fiction with a star-shaped birthmark. But of course, in this story, her sisters make fun of her for it.
Stepsisters, because this is an instance where the mom died in childbirth, and so the dad remarried. And in this case, because it's in a Persian setting, it wasn't 100% clear to me, but I think this is an Islamic setup. So she's living
It does seem to be.
So she's much more separated from her father in this version, just
Very
culturally.
very much separated from the father, from the men. So once again, this father at the very least has an excuse, not noticing his daughter is suffering.
I will throw some shade on the aunts and the cousins, though, because
Correct.
she has a stepmother, 2 stepsisters, 3 aunts, and 4 female cousins. And apparently, those 7 people, none of them care at all about their niece/cousin.
Rude.
Yep.
You know what? I could excuse the stepmother and stepsisters because they're in a Cinderella story. That's just gonna happen.
But the aunts and the cousins, I can't.
Absolutely not.
What's your excuse?
That is your brother's daughter.
You're not bound to the canon.
And so the sisters do get names in this one. There's Layla and Naid, and they're both really mean about her having the star-shaped birthmark. And so that's her version of the you are named after your Cinderella quality.
It's all weaving together, man.
Yep. And so this story starts when the father makes a rare visit to the women and it's like, here's a gold coin. Go buy some new clothing.
The New Year celebrations are coming up.
Yep.
They all dress up in their proper coverings and they go out. And Satara, being a good girl, she doesn't end up going to buy cloth. She buys toasted almonds from a peddler and then she gives money to a beggar woman because the beggar woman needs it more. And then, Jasmine, how did you put this?
I can't believe this is a Cinderella who the crux of her story is that she impulse bought something.
It is a cute little blue pot that is allegedly made of ordinary clay with a jagged crack down one side, but the illustrations make it look like this beautiful little glowing blue pot.
It's
so I
a
totally
tool
get why
that's gonna help
Satara
us
is into this, and I'm like,
Yeah, no. It's just funny to me that we have a Cinderella who represents those of us who have impulse buying problems.
Which is universal.
Weirdly enough, I feel seen here.
you know, she deserves some nice things. She has to deal with hand-me-downs and abuse from her stepsisters. Let her have some nice things.
And it turns out this is a very nice thing because it basically grants her wishes. And it's mentioned that it's possible that they call it a pari, which is basically their culture's version of a fairy that possibly lives in there, and that's why it's granting her wishes. That's really the only explanation we get.
And she's very judicious with the wishes. Like, she wishes for a little food, a warm shawl, some nice smelling flowers. And then on the New Year, that's when she wishes for a pretty outfit to go to the festival. Because her sisters already think she's not going since she didn't buy any clothes. So she gets her cool outfit, including our glass slipper for the type diamond-studded anklets, because it's mentioned that she has very delicate, slender ankles. And it's like a big, important thing.
Yeah, which is common in these Cinderella stories.
Yep. So she sneaks out to the palace. She has a run-in with a mysterious young man who smiles at her. And then she goes...
I wonder who it is.
She goes and she has a good time at the party, and because she's wrapped her face enough that nobody can see her little star mark, nobody knows who she is. She runs home, she loses one of her anklets, and
what a surprise. Turns out the guy he was the prince.
And
what
he finds the bangle and he's like, I'm gonna marry the girl who owns this bangle. And she sends his mom to do it.
Oh, I don't think
No,
she
it's not
can,
that he
though.
sends his mom to do
No,
it.
his mom
She's like,
volunteers.
right, she volunteers because think of her modesty.
Yeah, it's just like, you don't understand women. Let me take care of this, honey.
Good mama.
And so the classic search for the girl who owns this happens.
And, we don't get any mutilation, but we do get the queen's about to go, and then Sitara shows up in the finery, and she puts on the anklet. Then, I don't know why Sitara does this, but her sisters are like, how did you do it? And she tells them.
Why would you tell them?
Why would you
sweetie?
tell them?
Beautiful, naive land mermaid. Why?
But she
And of
meets the
course-
prince, and he sees the star on her cheek, and she's like, oh no, I'm ashamed of it. He's like, no, this is a sign from heaven. We're supposed to marry. It's written in the stars. So like,
No,
credit to this guy for
Swoon.
being totally romantic about it.
Yeah, like, that's very swoon-worthy.
So then the sisters, this is where shit starts getting weird. The
Yes.
sisters make a wish on the pot to have a way to get rid of Sitara forever.
Yep.
Oh,
And
this is
in-
why you don't give away your trump cards.
Yeah, and it heats up so that the sisters drop it. And among the shards are 6 jeweled hairpins. And they pin up Sitara's hair, and the pins turn her into a turtle dove, and she flies out the window.
What?
Yep. And the prince is like, where's my wife? And the stepsister's like, she ran off, but you can marry one of us. And he's just like, no one can ever replace her.
So good boy. Good prince.
Very loyal. We love
He
it.
sits
We
and
stand.
he sulks, and a turtle dove shows up at his window and spends months letting him befriend it until he
happens to
strokes
notice
it
the
and he
pins.
finds the pins and he's like, a bird shouldn't have hairpins. So he pulls them out, and lo and behold, she turns back into Sitara. And he's like, yay, my love! And they get married, and the sisters get so mad about this that their hearts explode from rage.
Oh.
This is like right up there with the versions of Rumpelstiltskin where he literally tears himself in half.
Oh yeah.
Yep, and then Sitara and the prince live happily ever after. The end.
Such a weird turn.
It is. I kind of love it though, because it does kind of remind me of like the traditional version of Beauty and the Beast, where she does have sisters who are sabotaging her.
So it could be
Like-
attributed up to Scheherazad's not getting enough sleep. Let's just wrap this up.
Yeah, so many questions, but oh my god.
I kind of love it though. I love that it kind of takes an extra turn. Like I feel like yeah, Scheherazade was just like, okay, we gotta figure out something. We gotta figure out what more conflict. He's
Can
getting
I?
bored.
How much longer am I gonna have to do this?
When am I gonna get to sleep?
So anyway,
Things
Shirley
like you
Clément she thanks the Persian community of Los Angeles for helping. They helped provide models for the characters and for costuming and architecture advice, and oh god, I
Love
hope I pronounce her name
acknowledgement.
right. She specifically thanks Mariam Nasir Begli for her extensive library and unending research assistance.
That is very cool, because as much as obviously own voices are important, it also just helps even if you are writing from a perspective you may not be familiar with, please do your research and be respectful. That's really all people really want, I feel
The
like.
standard that should be followed.
It's a fun story. I still can't get over the stepsisters just exploding. That is freaking amazing.
Wait, do they actually
Explosions
show
in
this?
Cinderella.
Do they actually show this in the picture book, or?
No,
They do
don't.
not show the sisters exploding, but that just
be
means
violent.
it's left up to the little children imaginations.
And I know for a fact your imagination knows how to scare you.
Yeah.
So if you are inclined to be scared by that, sorry kids. But maybe they'll discourage them from being jealous
We can only hope.
and petty. But yeah, it was really nice to revisit these.
Pretty much all of these are so much, with the exception maybe of Rhodopis, these are so much more interesting to me than the Cinderella stories that I grew up with
Yeah.
from European cultures.
I am inclined to agree, because part of it I feel like they really do put more effort into making you realize why the Cinderella figure and the prince figure belong together.
Yeah, I
With
think...
the exception of Rhodopis, but again, it was possibly the first, so I mean,
Yeah.
gotta give him some
But
grace
still,
for that, I
the
guess.
bird just swoops in.
The bird is playing matchmaker.
It's like a literal Deus Ex Machina.
Horace, don't you have better shit to be doing?
I mean, you could ask that about many, many gods from this era.
Yeah.
Given Rhodopis is Greek, we're lucky that Zeus was not involved.
Oh.
Nope.
You do not need another version of Leda in the Swan Egyptian verse.
Yeah, with the exception of Rhodopis, I have to agree. These are very interesting. It feels like the characters have a lot more depth than the more conventional Cinderella stories, I guess.
More fleshed out. Like, they actually have personality.
Although I think my favorite is probably Nyasha.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
She just wants to be with her plants and her animals.
Who can blame her?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's like she just wants to be in nature and be nice to all the animals. It's very sweet.
I mean, I hope she has, like, a nice garden that she can take care of.
At the palace,
Yes,
absolutely.
I feel like she definitely does. And the king hangs out in snake form in her garden because it's his way to relax.
Yeah, that'd be cute. And like he like wraps around her arm or something.
That'd
It'd
be
cute.
adorable.
And what if they have little snake babies?
They have the
snake babies.
Yeah, the snake babies. Like,
I'm still afraid of snakes, but, like, little snake babies are less terrifying to me.
That's valid. I find it's easier to most baby animals are just adorable. That's just a fact. That's why every species lives, basically. Their babies are cute.
or ugly cute in some cases.
Oh yeah, but
Yeah.
close enough. Like, I think my favorite love story is the rough-faced girl.
Yes.
Because, like I said, just...
Yeah, that's definitely the best story, and romantically, I think. As great as Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters is, it's a little creepy that the king was just kind of hanging out,
And testing.
semi-stalking his future wife.
Yeah.
But if Nyasha's down with it...
It is the classic story of, you know, the people being tested on their morality, basically, to see if they deserve a happy ending.
I can feel my Phantom of the Opera book on the shelf vibrating now, like, oh, so you're okay when he hangs out in a sus place and slowly judges whether or not this woman is worthy, but when I do it, it's creepy.
Well, you
I wish I
live
knew where
in
my Phantom
in an
mask
old
was.
decrepit opera palace, and he's king, so obviously there's gonna be a difference.
Sorry,
Also, he's,
Eric.
like, literally magic. He literally has magic.
Unlike you just had to fake it.
Also, you're a murderer.
That too. As far as we're aware, he has never killed anyone.
Yep. And these tests are probably in place, so there's a worthy queen to rule.
Exactly. Like, you don't want a queen that's going to be rude to everybody. Yeah. Anyway, final thoughts.
Get out of your Cinderella comfort zone.
Absolutely. Try different ones. Like,
Find your local written Cinderella subversion. There's so many of them, and try to go outside the stereotypical image that you have in your head.
because while of course there is something to be said about how people are a little hard on the traditional Cinderella, I feel like, because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
this is still the story of, you know what, this is a perfect time segue into why does Cinderella endure? Why is it that there's just versions upon versions upon versions? We talked about the underdog having their day, but I do also think part of it is it is the story of surviving abuse.
Yes.
It's a story of surviving abuse. Unfortunately, I also think there's sort of an insidious side to it of, as a morality tale for children, it's like the stereotypical, be good things come to those who wait, don't complain.
I definitely think there is definitely something to that, because, I mean, that is part of why people have been subverting the Cinderella story in recent years, where it's like, this is a Cinderella that tries to fight back.
Cinderella here is very young. I'm assuming that she's a teenager, and if she's relying on the stepmother for food, clothes, shelter, then it's gonna be that much harder for her to find any safety outside that.
But yeah, you're not wrong that it can be a little insidious. It's just like, just take it and everything will be okay.
I mean, the version where the evil stepmother is given no depth, it's like, just do it and be grateful.
Unfortunately, there are very much caregivers like that.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's something a lot of people do miss when they're analyzing Cinderella. It's like, people like that do really exist.
I think that's another thing. Cinderella kind of transcends political ideology to an extent, because she's like kind of a perfect bootstraps narrative in some ways. Like, if you work hard, good things will come to you, but it's also, there's an element of good come to those who ask for it. Depending on how you look at it, there are versions where Cinderella is proactive, even in the fairy tale versions of, like, getting her stuff together.
Like, she's, you know, trying to make it work, but she needs help. Either it's pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, or it's finding the people who are willing to help you.
And taking care of yourself. Like, Cinderella never asked for the prince. She asked for a night off.
Yeah. And we all can relate to that.
Oh my god, I'm so tired.
Listen, I worked in food service. That was my Cinderella era, man.
I still have scars from burns on my hands from when I worked AMC theaters and the popcorn oil burned me.
Ooh. Yeah, I've definitely had popcorn oil problems there too.
Popcorn burnerella.
There have been modernized versions where it acknowledges, food service is kind of the modern equivalent of that.
Yep, but we can't say anything more about that.
Cinderella
Ooh,
with a
and hiss.
hairnet.
Exactly. Once again, I would just like to say thank you for doing this to me, AMPTP.
Fuck you, AMPTP. Pay your writers, pay the actors, and leave the goddamn AI alone. You can't even copyright the AI!
I am so delighted by that.
It's
This is
gonna
a
go Skynet.
surprise segment of Retelling the News. The AI art belongs to the people now, bitches. So technically, you could make an argument that a certain struck company's opening credits belong to the people now.
Yay!
And there is something very funny about that. Karma.
Karma. And isn't that really what Cinderella's about?
Yeah. And I think that's the perfect way to end it. Who's got stuff to plug?
Donate to the Entertainment Community Fund to continue supporting actors and writers on strike. If you don't know what ancestral lands you live on, please look them up on native-land.ca and see if there's an active tribe in your area that you can donate to as well. I'm not plugging anything for myself because it feels really weird to do that right now.
That's very
And also,
fair.
I'm on strike.
Yep, donate to
Thanks a lot, AMPTP. As bad as it is for Jazz, it's worse for me.
I know.
My GoFundMe is still going, so if you can, donate what you can. And also donate to your local library.
Get a library card.
Yep. Listen, as Arthur once said, having fun is not hard when you have one of those.
Indeed.
By the time this episode is up, the Read from Maui challenge will be on its last legs, but that does not mean you shouldn't still try to donate to the mutual funds. The Lahaina Cultural Center, I'm sure, could still use the money as well if you
Support
can.
the people, not the developers.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And
Stop
don't go to Hawaii right now.
No, leave them alone.
Don't go, period. They've been begging us for years.
They really have.
And as always, you can find me on Twitter, Tumblr, and TikTok under Faye Riviera. And you can also follow this show on Twitter at IER Podcast. And please consider reviewing the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And spreading the word, because we really do have a lot of fun doing this podcast, and we would love to reach more listeners. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to friend of the show, Violet Remington. She just released the EP she mentioned during her interview, Planet Peach. And there's also an adorable music video to go along with the title track. Please give the album a listen on Spotify and watch the music video on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, stories gain power in each retelling. She was taken to the young prince, dressed as she was. He thought she was more charming than before, and a few days after married her. Cinderella, who was no less good than beautiful, gave her two sisters lodgings in the palace, and that very same day matched them with two great lords of the court.